From Los Angeles, I'm Eddie Garcia, Kings fan. He's Doug Stolhan, a Ducks fan. Thanks for joining us for the Puck Podcast. This is our first period of a three-period podcast. The first period, some of which you are watching right now on YouTube, recaps the past week in the NHL on and off the ice. Second period is our interview or special feature segment. This week, Doug is going to talk with Brian Fisher of Locked On Red Wings. And our third period is our fan feedback segment where we read listener emails and we talk about what's going on in our lives. You can find all three periods on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Puck Podcast. And if you would like to help us out by subscribing to our YouTube channel, we would greatly appreciate it. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Last check, we're at 720. If you subscribe, you also get notified when our latest show is out, including the Puck Podcast Hockey Minute each weekday. It recaps the night in the NHL and previews the next night's action as well.
And a thumbs up over on YouTube would also be appreciated, as that always helps the algorithm to spread the word of the show. Eddie and I have worked in sports media together for over 30 years, both together and separately, I guess. Fox Sports TV, Fox Sports Radio, NFL Network. But our passion is hockey, and we've been putting out this here Puck Podcast every single week for 18 years and counting, except 1 week. But we are going to tell you about every game over the past 7 days, and we start with the biggest stories in the NHL this past week. And for the headline, I turn it back to my good friend, Eddie Garcia.
Well, I thought we would have a coaching change last week. That did not happen, but we did get one this week, although it was not the one I was thinking, although this one not a surprise. The Detroit Red Wings fired their head coach, Derek Lalonde, on Thursday and named Todd McLellan as his replacement. The move came with the Red Wings on a 3-game skid and having lost 9 of their past 12. At the time of the firing, the team was 13-17-4 and above only Buffalo in the Eastern Conference standings. McLellan, who was still under contract with the LA Kings, signed a multi-year deal. Obviously, they negotiated him to get out of that contract. He gets a multi-year deal with his 4th NHL team after stints in San Jose, Edmonton, and LA. 57-year-old McLellan was fired as head coach of the Kings in February of last season after compiling a 164, 130, and 44 record over 4+ seasons. Trent Yawney joining him on his staff. He has Todd McLellan, career record of 598, 412, and 134. He has guided teams to the playoffs 9 times, and his best seasons as far as the postseason came with the Sharks when he reached the Western Conference Finals in 2010 and 2011. He returns to the Motor City after he was an assistant under Mike Babcock when they won the Stanley Cup in 2008. Lalonde, meanwhile, former Cup-winning assistant in Tampa Bay, leaves his first NHL head coaching job with a record of 89, 86, and 23, no postseason appearances. Bob Boughner also fired on his staff, and I mentioned Trent Yawney brought in to coach with McLellan. This is the 4th head coaching change in the NHL this season, the 15th in the calendar year, counting Rick Bowness's retirement in Winnipeg. So this season, though, coaching changes in Boston, St. Louis, Chicago, and Doug, now Detroit.
Yeah, it's not a surprise, as you mentioned. They were struggling. We're going to get into it here in the second period with our guest in detail about the timing of it, why this was the right move, why it was maybe overdue. But the frustration from the Red Wings fans has been palpable, despite the fact that they were very competitive last season and missed the playoffs due to a tiebreaker. So it was not like they were far off, but this season has been off to a very bad start. And going into the break, booed off the ice, listless performance, you have to wonder how much that played on the mind of GM Steve Yzerman as he opened up the Christmas presents and thought, what else can I do to change the fortunes of this team? Obviously, this was in the works before then. This was something that he had talked about with McLellan, because you have to, as you mentioned, he was under contract with the Kings, so you have to talk about that contract, and there's legalities to go over. So this isn't as snap a decision as it seems like to us on the outside. But when you see the team struggling as much as it has this season, not only in the win-loss record, but getting outplayed on a nightly basis, not looking competitive regularly, and just not showing progress. This is a team that is supposed to be building towards making the playoffs, not getting farther away. And last year was a step forward, it looked like, to where they thought, okay, we've got something going here, and we can maybe build on this. And that's not been the case. It's been a step back this year. And you wonder at that point how much longer they were going to give him. Derek Lalonde, he is not a guy with great NHL experience as a head coach. In fact, this was his first head coaching job in the NHL for Derek Lalonde. So it's not like he has a proven track record of turning things around. And it just seemed like the team was no longer progressing under him. And if that's the goal, what can you do, as we've always talked about, to shock the system of a team that is underachieving? And the easiest thing is to change the head coach. And I think that's the responsible thing to do, is to change the head coach and see what that does to the roster before you start making roster moves. I think it's foolhardy. It's so hard to draft, develop, sign, retain players in the NHL that to start making roster moves without trying a head coaching change first is foolish. You have to see if different leadership, a different voice behind the bench, in the locker room, in practice, a different approach to playing the game will yield different results. And if it doesn't, then you know that the players need to be changed. But let's see how they look under Todd McLellan, and let's see how much different this team can be going forward. We've already seen there's that short-term bolt that every team gets when they change head coaches. And we've already seen that from Detroit in just the 2 games that he's been there. Let's see how lasting that is. And let's see a month, 2 months from now, if they still look like a different team than they did in the first 2 months of this season. But as you mentioned, it's crazy, the coaching turnover in this league, that a guy like Patrick Waugh, who took over the Islanders in January, less than a year ago, has already got more tenure than 13 head coaches, I think. I mean, that's ridiculous. He's there's a long list of coaches that are shorter lived than him, and he was a guy that's been there less than a year. So it is not a job where anybody should buy a house. These are all people that should be renting. Leave your family where they are, because you're going to be back to them soon enough, a year or two. And if I would be interested if you could name the 5 most tenured coaches in the NHL, Eddie.
Well, you've got John Cooper,
Yes,
in Tampa Bay. You've got Rod Brind'Amour in Carolina.
that is 2 of them.
How many am I trying to name here?
Top 5.
Top 5. Okay.
And John Cooper's been there more than 11 years. So yeah, he's definitely the dean of the NHL head coaches. Rod Brind'Amour is 4th on the list. There are 2 guys that have been there longer than him. Both have won Stanley Cups with their team.
Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh.
Correct. And the tall drink of water in Colorado.
Jared Bednar.
Jared Bednar. And then the 5th one is surprising because it's somewhat recent, and that just shows how recent it's been. Martin St. Louis is the 5th most tenured head coach in the NHL with the Montreal Canadiens, and he's been there less than 3 years. So it is not a long-term job for these guys. But your thoughts, Eddie, on I thought this was – I wasn't surprised by this by any stretch. And if anything, I was surprised that Todd McLellan was still available with all the coaching changes we've seen. Seems like a good guy to come in and turn a team around. He's done it multiple times. With Edmonton, he was a transition coach. With the Kings, he was a transition coach. And here he is with Detroit to be a transition coach once again, to get a team that is struggling back on the right path and back into the playoffs.
Well, let me just start by saying Steve Yzerman is now on his 3rd head coach. He inherited Jeff Blashill, and he kept him for a little while. Then he brings in Derek Lalonde, and now he's on Todd McLellan. So obviously he's next as far as whose job is on the line. I think certainly he'll get a little bit more rope because he is who he is. But he's the next in line, I would say. I'm not saying anything's imminent. I don't know if anything will happen this year or not. Again, he's got some leeway because he is who he is, but he's next. As far as Todd McLellan goes, obviously I know him a bit because of his time in Los Angeles. I think certainly you could look at it as a retread. I mean, he's never won a Stanley Cup. I think the fact that he did win a cup as an assistant in Detroit, I'm sure he knows the Ilitch family, obviously, who owns the team, that helped him to probably get this job at least a little bit. But he's a really good X's and O's coach. I don't know that he's a great motivational coach. He's the type of coach, if you think about it from a boss perspective, right? He's somebody who's a really good boss, but it's like, I'll do my job and you do your job. You know what I mean? It's like the responsibility for you to kind of be motivated is on you. You know what I mean? That's the impression I get from him. So you're going to get structure, you're going to get good X's and O's, that kind of thing. But he's not one of those guys that really is going to inspire guys in the right moment with a few choice words. That's the read I have on Todd McClellan. But like I said, he's won a cup there as an assistant. That probably helped out a bit. I think he's a good coach, good guy to deal with. I think he's, if you're talking about as a fan, he's a coach that will pretty much be honest with you for the most part. He won't tell you what you want to hear. He's pretty forthcoming. So I wish him well. He did a good job in LA, but again, he's been around the block. He knows what he's doing. So we'll see if he can get things straightened out there in Detroit or not.
You believe that if this does not work, Steve Yzerman will be fired and not allowed to hire a fourth head coach?
I do not believe he'll be allowed to hire another head coach. No. Do you?
Yes, 100%.
Wow. That would be surprising. I don't know what the list is of GMs hiring coaches, how many, runs they get at it, who haven't won Stanley Cups, who have not made the playoffs. I would say it's probably, I would think 3 is about the number. So I know who he is and I know what he's done in that city. I would be shocked if he gets to hire another head coach.
I would be very surprised if they got rid of him at this point, I think it would have to really go bad here in the second half of the season for them to say, we need to change leadership.
I'm not saying it's this year. I'm not saying it's this year.
I understand, but
next year, if it's pretty much the same thing going on next year, I could see it.
I would be very surprised. I think he's got at least one more head coach in him. I think he's got more rope left of his slack.
Okay.
Slack in his rope.
Maybe, but he shouldn't. I don't believe. I don't think he should.
Well, we'll see. I mean, he does have to start showing results, obviously. And I think this was a right move because based on last year, you have to bring back Derek Lalonde. They were very close. They had 91 points on the season. I get bringing him back, but the season got off to a bad start. I can't blame him for making the moves he did. It's just we need to start seeing results. As Red Wings fans know, at some point, the rebuild has to have the build part and get to the playoffs. And this Eastern Conference, I think that last playoff spot is wide open. And the Red Wings still have enough time in this season to make a run. They've put themselves in a hole, but the teams they're chasing are not world beaters for that last playoff spot. So I think there's still time, and I think he saw that, and this is trying to salvage what's left of this season. But I would be surprised if a year from now they're still struggling. The Ilitch family says, out with Steve Yzerman, out with the head coach, we're starting over with the rebuild. That would be, or a whole new direction behind in the organization. That would be surprising to me.
Not to me. The Colorado Avalanche needed only 4 games to commit long-term to goaltender Mackenzie Blackwood. The Avalanche signed Blackwood to a 5-year contract extension worth $26.25 million. It runs through the 2029-30 season. Contract carries an average annual value of $5.25 million. The 28-year-old, who was set to be a UFA after the season, was acquired from San Jose on December 9th in a multi-year trade that included Colorado's previous number 1 goalie, Alexander Georgiev. Blackwood is 3-1 in 4 starts with the Avs, .931 save percentage, and a 2.03 goals against average. In his career, he is 84, 92, and 25 in 219 games over 7 seasons. With the Devils, Sharks, and Avalanche, he has a 3.04 goals against average and a .905 save percentage. Doug, my question to you is, what was the hurry on getting this done after, 4 games with the team?
Well, I don't get any of this. I don't understand. I don't care how well he does this year. Why would you sign this guy to a long-term deal? Not a long-term deal, but even a 3-year deal at 5.25.
At least
did you not learn your lesson?
At least see how he does for a season. I mean, I don't understand. What's the rush?
Well, he's a UFA at the end of the year.
But he's not going to be a guy teams are going to be falling all over themselves to sign, I don't think.
I don't either, but his price is only going to go up if he plays well. So if he has a good run in the second half and this team goes on a deep run in the playoffs, which they are built to do, then his price is only going to go up. So if your pro scouting department and your coaches all believe this is the guy that we need as our goalie for the next few years as we keep our cup window open, then I get that you sign him to the deal you did because it's a 3-year deal, just over $15 million. Fine. It's not outrageous. But I personally am not sold that Mackenzie Blackwood is that person.
Well,
and
it's a 5-year. It's a 5-year deal, by the way. It's not a 3-year deal.
It's a 5-year, $25 million deal?
Yes.
My numbers, I hate Puckpedia, by the way. Let me put it that way. The way they list it here is a 3-year deal. So that's on me for misreading their website. It's a terrible deal any way you slice it, in my opinion, because goalies are interchangeable. If we've learned nothing in the last 5 years of the NHL to 10 years, it's that you do not need a good goalie to win the Stanley Cup. You need a hot goalie, and that's it. And those can be found anywhere. And we've seen it time and time again with numerous teams that have put in somebody that is a journeyman or a guy you've never heard of, and they go on the run to win the Stanley Cup. It started, you go back to Jordan Binnington, came up from the minors, ends up winning the Stanley Cup that first season. Aiden Hill and the various goalies that Vegas has used over the years, same thing. So I'm not sold on the need for a number one goalie. They obviously were struggling before they made their trades, and they went out and got Scott Wedgwood, and they got Mackenzie Blackwood, and they've changed their goaltending completely, and they've been playing better ever since. But I don't get the need to sign this to that deal because I don't think Mackenzie Blackwood was going to commission this big of a contract in free agency, in my opinion. But like I said, if their pro scouting department and their coaches are convinced this is the guy to keep our cup window open, to make us competitive in net on a nightly basis, to give us the best chance, then I get that. I don't see how they could be convinced of that in such a short window and with no real pressure situation yet. Let's see how he handles the pressure of the postseason. And if I would tell him, we'd love to sign you long term, and if you make us write you a bigger check, good for you, but make us write you a bigger check, because at the end of the year, if he falls apart for some reason in the playoffs, then you'd be happy to not have him signed and be able to let him walk as a free agent and go get somebody else. This is not a team with a ton of cap space going forward, and I know the cap is expected to go up in years to come, but as you look at it, I just don't see a need to lock him up at this point and say, we have to commit to Mackenzie Blackwood because that's the guy we've been looking for all this time. I don't see it. I think he's good enough for this year. You had him signed for this year. Let's see how that works and then deal with that in the offseason. And if he makes you write a humongous check to keep him, great, because I think he would be interested in staying. The teams that are going to be looking for goalies are not nearly as good as the Colorado Avalanche. So if I'm Mackenzie Blackwood and I've had a great year and I go into the offseason and the Avalanche have any interest in me, I'm willing to negotiate with them to stay on a cup competitive team that I'm very comfortable with and just had success with. But I would rather write the bigger check and take the risk that I have to write a bigger check than take the risk that this guy doesn't fall apart. And now I'm on the hook with a no movement clause, a 6-team no trade clause for the next 5 years, because the difficulty in getting out of that contract outweighs the difficulty in writing a bigger check to retain him, in my opinion. I didn't understand this one at all. And maybe he'll prove us wrong. Lord knows many players have over the years, but I didn't think this is one that I would not have signed at all. This seemed like a snap judgment to me, and I know it's probably not, but it felt like that.
I mean, it's 4 games. Well, I'm saying
they
don't
had
understand.
To have scouted him before they before they acquired him.
Still, I mean, why not wait until it's close to the end of the year And if he's kicked ass the whole time, then fine. But you don't know what he's going to turn into. I mean, 4 games and yep, that's it. He's our guy. Okay.
Well, I gotta think this was in the works as soon as they got him, and it's just we're trading to acquire him with the idea that we're going to be able to retain him long term. And if that was the idea, I don't know. It's not the way the NHL has gone in recent years. I don't think you need that kind of permanence in net. I think a lot of teams have proven that a journeyman is just as good if he is in the right system and on the right team. It's you can get by with a lot less in net. I would be spending all my money on forwards and defense and going as cheap as possible in net, because that seems to be the way the NHL is trending. And retaining a guy for $5 million a year that is a little bit of a journeyman at this point in his career, a 28-year-old, it doesn't make much sense to me.
Well,
but
if you're going to
smarter minds than me,
if you're going to pay him that much money, I at least don't make it a 5-year deal, make it a 2-year deal or something like that. The
3-year deal, I thought when I first read it, when I first looked it up, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But a 5-year deal is too much. I mean, it gets him. Yeah, that's too much.
All right, we'll pass along some other news and notes as we go along, but it's time to recap all of the games from the past week in the NHL. If you are an NHL fan of any team, we are going to talk about your team. Now, some of the games might just be a quick score and a note. Other games will get a little bit more in depth. But let's go back to Monday, the final day of games before the holiday break. We had 13 games on the schedule, and we begin with the Jets beating the Maple Leafs minus Austin Matthews in Toronto 5-2. Mark Scheifele with a hat trick for Winnipeg, goals 19, 20, and 21. He also had an assist. Kyle Connor scored a pair of goals, numbers 20 and 21. He had a pair of assists as well. Jets go into the Christmas break with an NHL best 51 points at that point.
And Mark Scheifele, who gets his 10th career 3-goal game, became the 5th player in Jets or Thrashers history with 3 goals in a period. The first since Sean Monahan did it earlier this year, back in February, also in the first period. But Scheifele and Kyle Connor getting their 10th and 8th consecutive 20-goal campaigns, respectively. At that point, by the way, no Ducks player had 10 goals in the season. They have 2 guys with 20 goals. Scheifele's run is the longest in Jets Thrashers history, while Connor joins a short list of U.S.-born players in NHL history with a streak of at least 8 consecutive 10-goal seasons. And the list is on the board there for you if you're watching on YouTube. Patrick Kane had a 13-goal 13-year consecutive 20-goal season campaign run that ended back in 2020. Keith Tkachuk, Phil Kessel, Tony Amonte, Kyle Connor now ties to Austin Matthews, who's going to pass him and join Tony Amonte, tied for 9th very soon, with his 9th. Mike Modano, Jeremy Roenick, and Pat LaFontaine, the only U.S.-born players with consecutive 20-goal seasons of 8 years or longer. So exclusive company there for Kyle Connor, one of the quieter superstars in the NHL, and just shows the danger that this Winnipeg Jets team has, that they have 2 guys like Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor who are elite goal scorers in this league, and they have an elite goaltender in Connor Hellebuck. It seems like they've got everything they need to be a strong cup contender. And I think the reason we don't believe it is because we haven't seen it in the playoffs. We have not seen this team show up in the postseason yet. So when we see them go on a deep run, we'll believe it. They're great regular season producers, but we need to see it in the playoffs to really believe it. But man, Kyle Connor is on a heater, and Mark Scheifele is as well, his 10th career hat trick. And as I said, the 5th player in their franchise history with 3 goals in 1 period.
And if you're watching on YouTube, you see the picture of Kyle Connor, who is the Mike Glennon of the NHL. Do you get that reference, Doug?
A very long neck.
He has a very long neck. Yes, he does. It is, well.
Mike Glennon is a former NFL quarterback.
That's right.
That was, he was part of Giraffe.
Well, he may be a cousin of Kyle Connor because he's,
yeah. They kind of have that similar look too. Was Glennon also a redhead, a red beard?
He's a little bit of a ginger. Yeah, a little bit. Buffalo Sabres beat the New York Islanders on the road 7-1 to snap the 13-game losing skid. Yuri Kulik had 2 goals, while Rasmus Dahlin had a 4-assist night for the Sabres. Their first win since November 23rd. Hang your head in shame, New York Islanders.
And what a great win, though, for the Buffalo Sabres to go into the break. We talked about it last week, that just the losing building on them, and for the catch-up to finally start flowing, and they get 7 goals and win in a laugher. That is got to be a great feeling for them to go into the break. If they had gone into the break with the losing streak intact, it just weigh on you the entire time. This lets them exhale, lets them feel good about themselves, and go in with 2 points. And yeah, for the Islanders, that's a bad loss. That is a embarrassing loss when you get boat raced by a team that hasn't won all month.
And the losing continued for the New York Rangers, who in their final game before the holiday break were shut out by the Devils 5-0. Jack Hughes had 2 goals. Goalie Jacob Markstrom posted his second straight 12-save shutout. Rangers had lost 13 of 17 at that point, and veteran forward Chris Kreider was a healthy scratch for New York.
And that seems to have not done anything to spark the veterans on that team. Man, a 5-0 boat race to an area rival. I won't say cross town because they're obviously not in the same state, but not a long distance there between the Devils and the Rangers. And that's a rivalry game going into the break. It's been going bad in New York for a while. I still don't understand how this team can be as bad as it's been, but the proof is right in front of us. They are not a good team. They're not in a playoff spot, and that was an embarrassing effort. As you mentioned, 12 shots the entire game is embarrassing to go into the break for an NHL team. I don't know how you look back at that as a player and think anything other than shame as a player. I mean, that's just, it's not an acceptable effort. And that's when it tells me that it's not the coaching. When you're only getting 12 shots, the coaching is not telling you to not shoot the puck, not create scoring opportunities. I mean, the Devils had 11 shots in the third period alone, and you had 12 the entire game. That's awful. Just that's not competing, and there's far too much talent on there. And they had 4 power plays. If nothing else, get a couple shots on the power plays. It's terrible what's going on in New York right now. I don't get it.
Capitals lost in Boston to the Bruins 4-1. Washington held to a season-low 11 shots on goal. They even had 0 shots during a 5-minute major power play. In the win, Brad Marchand had a 3-point night, 2 assists, and his 15th goal of the season. Capitals dropped 1 point back of New Jersey for first in the Metropolitan Division going into the holiday break. Golden Knights won for the 8th time in 9 games with a 3-1 win over the Ducks. Tomas Hertl had the go-ahead goal in the third period, while Aiden Hill had 31 saves in net for the top team in the Pacific Division. Lightning shut out the Panthers 4-0 behind 36 saves from their backup goalie Jonas Johansson. Jake Gensel gets his 19th goal, Nikita Kucherov his 15th. That was before he was ejected for a knee-on-knee hit on Matthew Tkachuk. Tkachuk was helped off the ice, but he later returned to the game. Kucherov did not face any disciplinary action by the NHL's Department of Player Safety. We'll talk about another similar hit a little bit later on in the week. Penguins beat the Flyers 7-3. Pittsburgh star Sidney Crosby had a 4-point night, including a goal with 3 assists, and he moved into a tie with Hall of Famer Mario Lemieux for the franchise lead in career assists. Michael Bunting also a 2-goal game for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Sidney Crosby now 12th most in NHL history with 1,033 assists at the end of that. As you're seeing on the screen on YouTube, it's the 4th most assists with one franchise in NHL history. The only people that have had more is Ray Bourque, who I believe he will catch and pass at some point. He had 1,111 with the Bruins. Wayne Gretzky, 1,086. He will catch and pass him in short order. And Steve Yzerman, 1,063 with Detroit. So he is less than 80 assists away from being the all-time leader in assists with one franchise. And I think if he sticks it out, which they are back in playoff contention, then he will be that all-time record holder. Crosby also climbed up several other lists as well in that game. He tied Phil Esposito and Mark Messier with 183 for the 5th most 3-point games in NHL history, and passed Joe Sakic, tying Marcel Dion for the 10th most home assists in NHL history. He also passed Esposito and Steve Yzerman for the 9th most home points in league history. So a lot of history made by Sidney Crosby in that one as he goes in. And he's been the Christmas gift that keeps on giving for Penguins fans for many, many years now. They won that draft lottery, league-wide draft lottery, to get him. He has been nothing but gold for them ever since.
Wild snapped a 4-game losing skid with a 4-3 win over the Blackhawks. Kirill Kaprizov scored his 23rd of the season, while both Foligno brothers scored goals. Marcus for Minnesota and Nick for Chicago. Marcus's empty netter turned out to be the game winner. Blues blanked the Red Wings 4-0. Jordan Binnington, 19 saves in the shutout, and Dylan Holloway recorded his first career hat trick. Goals 11, 12, and 13 for him. That would be the final game as head coach of the Red Wings for Derek Lalonde. Canucks beat the Sharks 4-3. Elias Pettersson scored 2 goals 44 seconds apart. His second goal ended up being the game winner. Stars beat the Utah Hockey Club 3-2. Roope Hintz, his 15th of the season for Dallas. Hurricanes over the Predators 5-2. Jonathan Marchessault, pair of goals for Nashville in the win. He's got 8 goals in his last 10 games at that point. He was ice cold to start his tenure in Nashville, but he is heating up in a big way. Predators also announced that forward Cole Smith is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a lower body injury.
And just to clarify, that was the Predators beating the Hurricanes 5-2. You had said the Hurricanes beat the Predators 5-2.
I apologize.
But yes, a very nice win. And I'm starting to see the signs of life from Nashville. And it's amazing that the guys that were struggling, you mentioned Steven Stamkos got his 10th in that game. Jonathan Marchessault with 2, including the empty netter to ice it. Starting to see some signs of life from the guys they paid big money to and the team in general. They may, and it did not take the coaching change. I got to give them credit if they're able to turn this around without making a coaching change, which you and I have both been advocating for weeks now.
The Blue Jackets beat the Canadiens 5-4. Dmitry Voronkov had a pair of goals, while Kirill Marchenko scored the game winner late in the third for Columbus. Not only did the red-hot Patrik Laine not score a goal for Montreal in his first game back in Columbus against his old team, but he played just over 6 minutes before leaving and not returning with what the team called an upper body injury. More on that in a minute. But we also had a war of words between Laine and his former teammate Zach Werenski of the Blue Jackets. Laine, in a pregame interview, said about leaving Columbus, quote, "Obviously things happened and that was kind of it for me. I feel like we were just doing the same thing year after year. I was tired of losing and just giving up when it's December to start focusing on next year. I'm not going to do that. They are a little too satisfied and too comfortable with where they're at," end quote. Blue Jackets alternate captain Zach Werenski was vocal after the game, saying about Laine's comments, quote, "It's unfortunate for him to bash us like that. I think it's unacceptable. We were nothing but good teammates to him. None of us in this room are happy about it. I think it speaks more about him than it does about us," end quote. It was pretty clear if you saw the game, Doug, that the Blue Jackets were taking some runs at Patrik Laine. Nothing dirty, but they were going after him within the rules. I honestly don't know who reported this, but apparently it's out there that the Canadiens may have pulled Laine out of the game, not because he was hurt, but to protect him from getting hurt. Doug, first off, any issue with what Laine or Werenski had to say in their little war of words?
No, it's obviously their opinions. They're giving their. I'm never upset if somebody gives an honest opinion and an honest quote. And I think there's truth to both sides. I think that's what Patrik Laine's perception was while he was there. Him saying, "I'm tired of losing and giving up in December." I'm not sure you went to the right team. If that's your intention is to get back to competing for a Stanley Cup or the playoffs, Canadiens are not any hot ticket, but that's, getting out of there, getting a fresh start. But I think there is some truth to be said for especially a team like Columbus and a team like Anaheim, teams in small media markets where there's no pressure from outside the building to win. And if there's no pressure from inside the building, you're never going to win. And so teams get very complacent with losing because nobody cares ultimately outside. There's fans that get upset, but they still show up and the TV numbers are good and the money's coming in. And there's no ultimately, it would be unacceptable if this team was playing in New York or Toronto and losing as bad as they were year after year after year. It would be the major story. So, but when you're in Columbus, when you're in Nashville, when you're in Anaheim, you can kind of get lost in the shuffle of the other sports that are going on in your city. And I think there is some truth to that. It's an Ohio State first and foremost town with their football team. That's the primary focus in the early part of the season. And the Blue Jackets probably have gotten a little complacent. And we certainly saw them make a change in their leadership, their front office, and we're seeing if that's going to pay dividends here in the on the ice. And so far this year it has. They're much more competitive. But I have no problem with what Patrik Laine said, if that was his perception while he was there. And I have no problem with Zach Werenski saying that's a bunch of bull, and he was out of line for saying that because that's his perception. He's the leader of that team. He's the captain. I wouldn't expect him to agree with it. I would be shocked if he did. But, if Werenski comes out and says, hey, man, we only get paid for the 82 games. I'm not playing for free. That would be shocking, and he would be disciplined. But he's obviously not going to say that. So I have no problem with either one of them. I did go back and watch this game based on the comments that we heard afterwards. And I have to agree with what the Canadiens are alleged to have done, if that is what they did, because it seemed, well, you can get into the details, but it seemed like that was the case when you go back and watch the tape.
Well, I'll just, as far as the last part of that goes, I agree with you. I think they were absolutely taking runs at him, but they weren't doing anything dirty. They weren't, punching him in the back of the head or slashing him in the back of the knee, or, they were going at him. They were going at him hard, and they were playing him hard. And it just seems very unhockey-like for a team to say, we're going to take you out of the game because we're afraid you might get hurt. Well,
they were targeting the shoulder hockey that he had the surgery on.
Okay, but if you're good enough to, as we've said many times, if you're good enough to play in the game, right, you're good enough to be held accountable for your performance, and you're good enough to, if they say you're healthy enough, then you should be healthy enough to take hockey hits, which is what they were giving him.
Yes and no. If a team is clearly going after, and they know his medical history because they had him last year, if they're clearly going after a part that he has had surgery on, and they're going to hit him every chance they get on that shoulder, why leave him out there when he's been so vital to your success in recent weeks? I have no problem benching him to avoid injury because other teams are not targeting his left shoulder every single time they hit him. And if that's the case, I don't have a problem. Nothing was dirty, but it was a clear mission of the Columbus Blue Jackets to hit him on that left shoulder every single chance they get. If you're near him and you get a chance to hit his left shoulder, do it. And if that's going to be the case, I have no problem taking him out of the game.
Well, like I said, it seems very unhockey-like to do that to me. As far as what Patrik Laine said, I think it wasn't necessarily what he said. I think it was who was saying it, because Patrik Laine saying that, the Blue Jackets basically are a bunch of quitters is coming from a guy who I think a lot of the Blue Jackets players thought wasn't exactly always busting his ass to be in the lineup night in and night out. He had a lot of injuries. He had the off ice, whatever it was that kept him out of the lineup. He was never in a hurry to be one of the guys that was getting back on the ice to do his share. So I think who it was coming from was probably as much as what was said.
Well, there's definitely bad fits between players and franchises, and where players are just not happy in certain cities, and then they go somewhere else and they're extremely happy and productive, and it drives you crazy as a fan because you're like, where was that when he was on my team? Why couldn't Patrik Laine be a power play scoring machine when he was on the Blue Jackets? Where was that lethal one-timer? And it's just a bad fit, just like it is for people. Sometimes you're in a bad situation, bad relationship, you're not happy. When you get out of it, you're much happier. And it's not that damning of a thing to say that everybody that plays in Columbus is going to be unhappy, but Patrik Laine clearly was. And he's much happier in Montreal. Hopefully, right, for now. But hopefully that's it was a nice rivalry. It was nice to see a couple of teams that aren't usually spicy
being spicy. Yes. All right. As Doug, by the way, Doug is a little under the weather. And so he's got some coughing going on. while he composes himself and gets himself better. We had no games Tuesday through Thursday. There was the holiday break, but that did not apparently stop one team from practicing. That would be the Dallas Stars. Apparently, they held an optional practice during the holiday freeze, which goes against the rules of the collective bargaining agreement. And as a result, the organization reportedly was fined $100,000. The CBA strictly prohibits on ice activities and travel on specified dates during the holidays. Doug, we've been doing this show for 18 years. I know this is not the first time that a team has been fined for doing something like this, but the Dallas Stars were the latest team to get hit with this. Who, by the way, who reports this? Like, I mean, I'm guessing. Well, I guess the players could if they were upset that they were forced to do this, but I wonder who blew the whistle on this. Interesting.
Well, what do you think? I mean, it's not a secret, that the players.
I know, but somebody has to tell the league. It's not like the league has representatives in every NHL city at their practice rinks to be like, is anything going on here?
No, but if the media reports the Stars had an optional practice today, that's enough for what's that? What time was that? What day was that? And it's egregious by the Stars. They know the rules. It's stupid. I mean, is it really worth it to get an extra skate in? I guess if you're just going to pay the $100,000 fine, these are billionaire owners. They don't care. But it seems crazy to me that you would look. It's like Midnight Madness. We can start practicing in college basketball at midnight. That's when you start practicing. You don't have an optional team practice at noon the day before. It's just not worth it. So, and if I was a player, I'd be like, what are we talking? We have a holiday break that we've negotiated into the CBA. I'm not showing up. Optional. I don't care if it's optional. Then I'm opting not to go. And it would have been a no-show for me. It would have been an absolute no-show because that's part of the holiday break. I wouldn't have even considered it. I'm not checking my emails. I'm out of town, out of office. But I don't understand why the Dallas Stars would do this because I don't see the positive, even though it's a $100,000 fine, which is a slap on the wrist. I don't see the positive in doing this and what the benefit is overall.
All right, well, the teams were officially back in action on Friday. We had 8 games. 3 games featured hat tricks, including the Maple Leafs spoiling the head coaching debut of Todd McLellan in Detroit with a 5-2 victory. Mitch Marner led Toronto with a hat trick, goals 11, 12, and 13 as the Leafs won without injured star Austin Matthews once again. Lucas Raymond did have his 14th goal in the loss for Detroit, and goalie Cam Talbot allowed 5 goals on 21 shots before being pulled after the second period. Kind of
a tough debut as a head coach when you got hired that day. I don't know that you barely.
I think it was the day before, but still.
Okay, but there was no team practices that day, were there, on the 27th? No. So no. The 26th. So yeah, it's, hey everybody, good to meet you. I'm your new head coach. Let's go play one of the best teams.
He's literally learning names.
Yeah, he's yelling numbers right now.
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, there's obviously some veterans that you're going to recognize immediately. Hey, Patrick Kane's here. Vladimir Tarasenko. Hot damn. But yeah, he's yelling numbers in practices for sure.
The Avalanche knock off the Utah Hockey Club on the road 4-1. Arturi Lehkonen had his first career hat trick, goals 11, 12, and 13, while Mikko Rantanen added his 20th of the season. Mackenzie Blackwood, first game since signing his extension, made 34 saves in net. And Nathan MacKinnon had 3 assists to become the NHL's first 60-point player this season, 14 goals and 46 assists in 37 games. He got in a fight too, by the way. I don't think that's what they want him to do, but he was in a fight in this one as well.
60 points already this season. And he's, as you mentioned, just a crazy 37 games in, and he's got 60 points, which is a franchise record, by the way, for the Avalanche. It's also his, in 2024, for the entire calendar year, going back to January 1st, he has 142 points in exactly 82 games played at that point. So that's kind of good. 46 goals and 96 assists here in 2024. He became the 8th different player in NHL history to record at least that many regular season points in a calendar year. Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Phil Esposito, Connor McDavid, Jaromir Jagr, Mike Bossy, Marcel Dion are the others. All the absolute tip of the spear as far as the elite in the NHL's history. And Nathan MacKinnon is just on another level production-wise than almost everybody else in the league. I think Connor McDavid and him are the only two that can score consistently. Nikita Kucherov at that pace over a calendar year, 142 points in 82 games. That's crazy.
Sabres win again. Back-to-back wins for Buffalo. They beat the Blackhawks 6-2. Alex Tuch had a hat trick. Goals 10, 11, and 12 for him in the win for Buffalo. Devils down the Hurricanes 4-2. Nico Hischier scores his 18th of the season, and defenseman Luke Hughes ends up with the game winner. New Jersey reaches the 50-point mark with that victory. And
that is the first of back-to-back games, and we will have more on that.
We had several of
Saturday's
those
recap.
Yeah, several back-to-back games amongst teams this week. Golden Knights double up the Sharks in San Jose 6-3. Vegas scored a pair of shorthanded goals on the same Sharks power play. That was part of a 4-goal third period for the Golden Knights as they lead the Pacific Division and hit the 50-point mark as well. They had won 5 in a row and 9 of 10 at that point.
How about this? They scored those 2 goals in 23 seconds. Both were shorthanded. One tied the game, one took the lead. That is already the 6th time this year that the Golden Knights have scored 2 goals within 30 seconds. That's absurd. 6 times you've scored 2 goals in 30 seconds this season. The Canucks and Sabres, by the way, have also done it 4 times, and that Sabres might surprise you. Certainly did me, team that's been losing as much as they have, but that's a lot of quick goals, quick strike goals right there for the Vegas Golden Knights. When they score one, be on the lookout on that next shift because they have already scored a second goal within 30 seconds 6 times and doing it shorthanded in a game where you were losing. Then you tie it and take the lead shorthanded in 23 seconds. Man, I'd be losing my voice, not just from the cold and the flu, but from booing if I was a Sharks fan on that one.
Wild without star Kirill Kaprizov edged the Stars in Dallas 3-2 in overtime. Minnesota trailed 2-0 heading into this game. And then they were able to rally and get the road win. Again, without Kirill Kaprizov, he is listed as day-to-day with a lower body injury. Also hurt in this game, Dallas forward Mason Marchment, who's been very good for them this season, taken to the hospital after a deflected puck went up into his face. He is now listed as week to week. So a couple of big players injured, one before the game, one during the game between the Wild and the Stars.
But definitely a dandy of a game. And that one might even get a Grandma Fiddler phone call from that one. A 3-2 overtime win behind a couple of the elite in the Central Division. Not going to catch Winnipeg most likely at the top or Colorado when it's all said and done. But certainly 2 of the best in the Central Division, giving a good performance there for the fans.
Blue Jackets surprised the Bruins 6-2. Sean Monahan, a pair of goals. Also teammate Dmitry Voronkov, 2 as well. Zach Werenski had a 4-assist game as Columbus scored 3 power play goals in the victory. And Jonas Korpisalo for Boston, 6 goals allowed on 33 shots, losing to his old team.
Also snapped Brad Marchand's point scoring streak. So that ended at 7 games, I believe. But Zach Werenski factoring in on 4 of his team's 6 goals, climbed a couple of franchise lists. He got his 5th career 4-point game, which ties Artemi Panarin for the most in Blue Jackets history. He's the 2nd player in franchise history with multiple 4-assist outings, the other one also being Panarin. And Werenski is one of 2 blue liners with 4 assists in a game this season. Rasmus Dahlin did it earlier this month back on the 23rd. In fact, on Monday, in Monday's boat race win over the Islanders. And Werenski has accumulated 7 assists in his past 2 games, giving his totals to 39 points in 36 games, the 3rd most points and 4th most assists among all NHL defensemen. So Zach Werenski leading in as the captain and also leading on the ice with his performance. A great season so far from a guy that has had health issues, but when he's healthy is one of the absolute best defensemen in the NHL, certainly at producing offense from the blue line, and an impressive home win against a good Bruins team.
And the Blues outscored the Predators 7-4. Robert Thomas, 2 goals for St. Louis. Jordan Kyrou added his 15th of the year. And defenseman Cam Fowler scored his first goal as a member of the Blues. St. Louis scored 4 first-period goals, a season high, and the 7 goals in total, also a season high for them as well. Moving on to Saturday, we had 11 games on the schedule, and the Capitals beat the Maple Leafs 5-2 in Toronto. Still no Austin Matthews for the Leafs, but Washington welcomed back the great eight, Alexander Ovechkin, in the lineup after missing 16 games with a fractured leg, and he scored his 16th goal of the season into an empty net, as he enjoys doing from time to time in the win for the Capitals. So for Ovechkin, career goal number 869, now 26 goals away at that point from breaking Wayne Gretzky's career goal scoring record and adding to his own record for career empty net goals with 60. Tom Wilson added his 14th of the season for the Caps, and goalie Logan Thompson improved to 14-2-2 with the win. In the loss, John Tavares had his 18th of the season. But Doug, great to get Ovechkin back. Great to see him going after the record immediately once again. But how about the Capitals? Got to give it up to them. Without Ovechkin, they were 10-5-1 without him in the lineup. So very, very respectable job for the Caps and their head coach, Spencer Carberry, of dealing without the future Hall of Famer.
No doubt. Not only withstanding the loss, but actually somewhat thriving and keeping them in strong playoff contention. Ovechkin not only picking up where he left off, but it also extends his own record for most goals before the 20th game of the season for any player 39 or older in history. The only players that have gotten more than him are Gordie Howe, Teemu Selanne, Jean Rattel. The only other ones with 10 or more. Ovechkin now is 16. So he has got the record for most goals before your 20th game in NHL history for a player that is 39 or older. And he is continuing to defy age. You mentioned Logan Thompson, the job that he's done in net. There's a guy that, why not give him a 5-year, $25 million deal? Yeah. That's a fantastic stat. And he's a UFA after this season. He's making $766,000. That's a guy that I could see giving a big contract to, not Mackenzie Blackwood. But I think they're doing the right thing. They got Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson for combined less than $2 million on their goaltending.
That's how you do it right there.
That's exactly right. And that is why they can spend what they have on their forwards and defense, because they're spending so little on goaltending, and it's working out well for them. And when you got Ovechkin scoring goals as quickly and as often as he has, what a great return. What a great Christmas present, late Christmas present, Hanukkah present, Kwanzaa present for the Capitals fans to open up, is seeing the great eight back and scoring goals right where he left off.
Kings beat the Oilers 4-3 in overtime, and what could be a playoff preview for a fourth straight year. LA got a pair of goals from Quentin Byfield, including the overtime game winner. Warren Fogle, against his old team, had a goal and 2 assists as the Kings improved to 11-2-1 on home ice. Edmonton Stars, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid each had 1 assist, but McDavid did not have a shot on goal in this game, as obviously the Kings hang their hat on being a strong defensive team. They did a good job against obviously both those guys. I was at the game, had a great time. Obviously, as a Kings fan, we have built a bit of resentment against the Edmonton Oilers for some reason, but that was, it's just one win in the regular season, but the first meeting between these two teams, and that was quite fun and good to see Quentin Byfield scoring a couple of big goals in a big game. He's not performed great this year as far as the numbers go, so hopefully he is an important player for the Kings. Hopefully that can get him going in a positive direction.
Well, he's been playing well lately. He's been picking it up this month, and I mean, it's like you said, it's if you look at the standings, and we'll talk about them at the end of the first here, it looks like they're on a collision course for a first round matchup once again. That doesn't bode well for the Kings. They've had their troubles shutting down Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid and finding enough goals. No, I know, but especially in the playoffs. And it's, like you said, they went to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final last year, the Oilers. So this is a team that is a proven playoff performer, and the Kings have had their trouble with them. And it's unfair to the Kings that they have to, this setup is what it is, that they have to play the same team year after year, and it has to be the team that has 2 of the best players in the league offensively. But it gives you confidence that you can get it done. It's just a matter of getting it done when the games matter in April. And it looks like those two teams are destined to play each other once again.
Yeah, especially since the Golden Knights apparently can't lose, and it doesn't look like either the Kings or Oilers can catch them, but we'll talk more about them in a minute. Right. Canadians surprised the Panthers with a 4-0 shutout win in Florida. Jakub Dobeš stopped 34 shots to win his NHL debut. He's the 5th goalie in Canadians history to have a shutout in his NHL debut. Kirby Doc provided the offense with a couple of goals. Cole Caulfield gets his 18th of the season. Patrick Laine did play in this game, perhaps adding fuel to the fire about him not really being hurt in the previous game. Played 16 minutes and 45 seconds, no points. But back to Dobish, he is the first goalie to record a shutout against the defending Stanley Cup champs in his debut since Darren Pupa of the Buffalo Sabres against the Edmonton Oilers in 1985.
And he's just the 7th goalie in NHL history to get a win in his debut against the reigning Stanley Cup champ, a list that we're showing on our YouTube channel right now. And Jakub Dobish, the 2nd active goaltender to earn a shutout in his NHL debut. The other one was John Gibson, who did it back in 2014. He also is the 4th Canadiens goalie to get a shutout in their league debut. Bob Perreault, Wayne Thomas, and Jan Denis, the other 3. So exclusive company there. But as you look at this list of guys that have beaten the Stanley Cup champion in their NHL debut, it's not an illustrious list. These are not a lot of great names, but it is a list. And you see, I think what it shows is the picture there of him with the puck and his family celebrating after the game. And it looks like his mom's arm is in a sling, but that's her purse. It just shows the smile of what better debut can you have than playing against the defending Stanley Cup champ, earning a win, getting a shutout, having your family in the stands. Just an excellent night for Jakub Dobish. The dream comes true all at once. The only thing better than that would be actually being in the playoffs and winning a key game for your team to advance, perhaps. But my goodness, what a night for him.
Hurricanes knocked off the Devils 5-2. They were down 2-1 in the third and then scored 4 unanswered goals. The final 2 by Jack Roslovic, his 15th and 16th of the season. Dustin Tokarski had 21 saves in net as the Canes split the home-and-home matchup with New Jersey, and Carolina head coach Rod Brind'Amour becomes the fastest coach to 300 wins in NHL history. He did it in 488 games, 8 fewer games than Bruce Boudreau. Also, New Jersey's Timo Meier was ejected for a knee-on-knee hit on Carolina's top scorer, Marty Necas. Necas fortunately did not miss a shift after initially grabbing his knee and going to the ice. Carolina did score on what would turn out to be the game winner on the 5-minute major that was called. The knee-on-knee hit, very similar to the Nikita Kucherov incident, and for better or worse, the NHL Department of Player Safety ruled that Timo Meier would not receive any supplementary discipline as well. So at least in this case, they were consistent, but the message is, and we see this in the NFL as well, Doug, go to the knees, that's fine. Go to the head, that's not fine. But knees, we don't really care about that.
Yeah, and that's a shame because it's just as dirty. I think it's even more dirty. I think there's more intention behind the knee. I think a hit to the head can be a hit that you're just trying to deliver to somebody, not trying to pick the head, but it ends up being a hit to the head primarily. Knee on knee is rarely accidental. And it seems like, you're sticking the knee out there, maybe not to hit him in the knee, but definitely to trip them at the very least. And I thought both of them deserve supplementary discipline, at least a fine. Neither of them get it. I was disappointed in that, but that's the NHL. And this was a spicy game, which choked me up last time we talked about it. But this was a game with a lot of passion behind it, and we saw some dirty hits. We saw some fights after the whistle, which we don't see a lot of in the NHL these days. But this was the last game of the season series for these two teams, and it ended with some bad blood. And I thought it was interesting that it got politicians involved, that North Carolina's governor, Roy Cooper, took to Twitter after the game to write, "Glad our Canes are done with the New Jersey Devils for the regular season. Great win tonight while surviving some vicious hits. Devils are too good for such dirty play," end quote. There's a lot of things going on in our world right now, and I don't think the governor should give a flying fornication about the outcome of a professional hockey regular season game.
He's allowed to be a hockey fan. It's all right.
Yeah, but I don't know, man. That's there's things you need to be worrying about, Governor, and this ain't it. But it was interesting that it reached that level, and it was a passionate game. The Orlov hit from Eric Haula, where Orlov is down on the ice, and then when he gets up, he's going after Haula, and he comes off the bench to go get Haula again on his way to the penalty bench or the penalty box. That was an interesting. And I don't think any supplementary discipline came from that because, as far as I know, Dmitry Orlov left the bench to come back after. He was escorted to the bench because he was hurt and then left the bench to come back after Haula. No supplementary discipline, which I thought was automatic, but it was a spicy game. And if those two teams meet in the playoffs, that will be some very bad blood. I'm hoping that we see a first round matchup between the Devils and Hurricanes, specifically because these two teams clearly do not like each other.
Jets down the Senators 4-2. Winnipeg fell behind 2-0, then scored 4 unanswered goals. Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele each scored their 22nd goals of the season. Jets get their NHL leading 26th win of the year and their NHL leading 53rd point of the season. No Linus Ullmark for Ottawa. Their number one goalie is out indefinitely with an apparent back issue and is not with the team on their extended road trip. So not good news for Ottawa as they're trying to hold on to a wild card spot in the East.
Yeah, that's a brutal loss. He's been playing so well for them this month. And that's the guy they went out and got to be their goalie and solve their long-term goaltending issues. They certainly need him if they're going to make the playoffs, I would think. And hopefully he's able to return sooner rather than later. At least there's no timeline. It's kind of that indefinite. Hopefully it's on the shorter end, but doesn't sound like his return is anywhere close.
Kraken rally late to beat the Canucks in Vancouver, 5-4 in overtime to snap a 5-game losing streak. They were down 4-1 late in the third. They got a pair of goals from Jaden Schwartz and 2 from Vince Dunn, his second being the overtime game winner. Kraken became the third team in NHL history to win a regular season game after facing a 3-goal deficit in the final 5 minutes of regulation. Brock Besser had a pair of goals in the loss for Vancouver as the Canucks dropped to 7-7-6 on home ice this season.
That is crazy that stat, as you mentioned, they get the third team in NHL history to win a game where they were down 3 goals in the final 5 minutes. The other two were the Sharks back earlier this year, by the way, October 28th. They did it this season. The Canadiens 10 years ago in 2014. We were not doing the show. Yeah, we were doing the show back then. My God. And the teams, 3 teams have done it in the playoffs. Toronto back in 2020 in Game 4 of the Stanley Cup quarterfinal. Anaheim in Game 5 of the 2017 second round. And Edmonton in 1997's conference quarterfinal. So the only game that it's ever happened that we did not cover here on the Puck Podcast was the Oilers back in 1997. But that's surprising that it's only happened 3 times in NHL history, isn't it, Eddie?
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, it's not that outrageous to score 3 goals in 5 minutes. We saw the Golden Knights score 2 shorthanded goals in 23 seconds. So it just that surprised me. But good on the Kraken for putting that comeback together. And you know, if you turned that game off thinking, hey, we're up 4-1 going into 5 minutes left, last commercial break, I'm good. Holy mackerel, what happened? What do you mean we lost?
Yeah, that's something you would do, by the way. In the second game of a home-and-home against each other, the Bruins shut out the Blue Jackets 4-0. Goalie Jeremy Swayman had to only make 18 saves in net, while David Pastrnak scored his 13th of the season in the victory.
I was watching that second-round game that the Ducks came back and won in 2017. That was Corey Perry scoring the game winner. I remember that one very well. So I did not give up. When the team's good, I don't give up. When the team's bad, I pull the chute pretty quick.
Lightning defeat the Rangers 6-2, scoring 2 power play goals and 2 shorthanded goals. Tampa Bay had won 6 of 7 at that point. Braden Point gets his 23rd of the season. Jake Gensel his 20th, and Nikita Kucherov his 16th. Also, Lightning defenseman Victor Hedman passed Steven Stamkos to become the franchise leader in games played with 1,083. For New York goalie Igor Shesterkin allowed 4 goals on 13 shots and got pulled. Artemi Panarin, his 16th of the season, the Los Rangers 4-14 in their last 18 games.
You mentioned the 12 shots that they had going into the break, right, against the Devils. And that obviously stuck in their craw a little bit. They had 44 shots in this game, 17 in the first period alone, 19 in the third period. So the Rangers were definitely going to make sure they got their shots in on this one. And it's still to no avail. I mean, my goodness, just getting absolutely embarrassed out on the ice on a nightly basis. And you got to wonder, Shesterkin's got the big contract. I'm not saying he's going to be a bust by any stretch. Nothing's working right now for the Rangers. And when you have 44 shots and you only get 2 goals and the other team only has 25 shots and gets 6 goals, things are going bad for the Rangers, and I don't know what the solution is.
Flyers beat the Ducks in Anaheim 3-1. Philadelphia's Morgan Frost scored the game-winning goal in the third period. Noah Cates scored a goal in a fifth straight game for him. And goalie Samuel Erston, 32 saves in net. Cutter Gauthier, the former fifth overall pick by the Flyers in 2022, of course, wanted out and was sent to Anaheim. Played his first game against Philadelphia, no points in 13 minutes and 19 seconds. How has Cutter Gauthier looked for the Ducks this year, Doug?
He's looked good. I mean, he's been a guy that was started the season snake bit. We'll talk about him in a second when we get to Sunday's games, but he's looked good. Far better than. Look, Jamie Drysdale, he made his return to Anaheim. Good to see him. I wish him well. I would rather have Cutter Gauthier 10 times out of 10 than Jamie Drysdale, especially with the depth the Ducks have on defense. That's a trade that is still a masterstroke by Pat Verbeek, and he hasn't had a lot of them. But Cutter Gauthier, I know he was looking forward to this one. I know he's got to play in Philadelphia later this year, but this was he's been fine. He's been fine.
Islanders down the Penguins 6-3. Casey Cizikas and Andre Lee each scored a pair of goals. For Lee, numbers 14 and 15 for him. Rickard Rakell for Pittsburgh in the loss gets his 17th. And Sidney Crosby was originally credited with an assist to set a new franchise record, but the assist was later erased on a scoring change. So at that point, Sidney Crosby would not have the record for Pittsburgh. Stay tuned.
Temporary record holder.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of time. I'm just guessing.
And the Flames took care of the Sharks 3-1. Jonathan Huberdeau, a pair of goals, numbers 14 and 15 for him. He now has reached his career high in goals in a season with the Flames. Had 15 his first year, 12 last year. So Jonathan Huberdeau finally settling in Calgary and starting to play like the player we saw in Florida. Dustin Wolf, 21 saves in net in the win. Sharks, Macklin Celebrini did score the lone goal for San Jose. Leads all rookies with 12 on the season, but the Sharks dropped to 0-6-1 in their last 7.
Yeah, they had a nice run. The Sharks did to begin the month. It's been a bad end of the month, a bad end of 2024 for the Sharks as they fall down the standings.
And finally, 9 games on Sunday. As you are watching or listening to this was just a little while ago for us as we record this Sunday night Pacific time.
An unusually busy Sunday.
It was a little bit, probably because of the holiday break, I guess. But the Red Wings get their first win for new head coach Todd McClellan as they knocked off the Capitals 4-2. Alex DeBrincat a pair of goals, numbers 14 and 15. Lucas Raymond, his 15th, and Patrick Kane had a goal and assist to reach the 1,300 career point mark. In the loss, Alexander Ovechkin did score another goal. He now has 870, and that puts him 25 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's career goal scoring record.
The chase is definitely on, and when you're at 25, it's seems like a number that he could potentially get this rest of this season. What a run that would be if he could make it. And if they have any empty net opportunities, you got to get him on the ice and feed him that puck. I mean, my goodness.
Sure. No, there's no doubt. He leads the NHL all-time in empty net goals for a reason.
Yeah.
The Golden Knights shut off the Flames 3-0. Ilya Samsonov, 31 saves in net. Brett Howden gets his 15th of the year. Golden Knights have won 6 in a row and 10 of 11 at this point.
Winning is a disease as much as, I mean, look, we talked about them in the offseason about the losses that they had and what direction they were going. They're better than ever right now. And they are, as we talked about last week, they're flying under the radar. Nobody's talking about them as a league power, but they are elite right now. And it's an impressive thing that they got going on in Vegas.
Unfortunately so. Despite Doug Stolhan telling me there was zero chance his Anaheim Ducks could defeat the Edmonton Oilers, the Ducks said, "Suck it, Stolhan," and beat the Oilers 5-3. Anaheim was down 3-1 before scoring 4 unanswered goals. In the loss, Edmonton's Leon Draisaitl did score twice, leads the NHL with 26 goals now, but obviously a nice win for your Ducks.
Oh, very much so. And as you mentioned, you asked about, Cutter Gauthier had a goal and an assist. That is his 5th goal on the season, all within the last 6 weeks or so. He started off snake bit. He's up to 11 assists, so not tearing it up, but he's a guy that loves to shoot the puck and is finally starting to get some dividends for his efforts. So his 5th goal of the year. Drew Helleson has been great since getting called up as an opportunity and has forced his way into a very crowded defensive lineup, and I've been very impressed with him. He's doing exactly what you should do which is make them keep you on the ice. And he keeps playing well. He had a big goal tonight. Robbie Fabry playing for a trade at the deadline, most likely, but looked great. Ryan Strome, another good game. And Mason McTavish, who desperately needs a reason to get on a heater, had a goal and an assist as well in a very good game. So very impressive effort from the Ducks, who uncharacteristically outskated their opponent from beginning to end. I thought 32 shots on net to 23 by Edmonton. They outplayed the Oilers, which I did not see coming, despite going 0 for 5 on the power play, which is not unusual for them, and the Oilers going 2 for 3 on their power plays.
Penguins beat the Islanders 3-2 to split the home and home, and Sidney Crosby does get an assist in this one, and he does pass Mario Lemieux. Now holds the franchise record for career assists with 1,034. Evgeny Malkin's power play goal in the third period ended up being the game winner. Canadians surprised the Lightning with a 5-2 win in Tampa. Montreal had 5 different goal scorers. Jack Evans scores a goal for a 5th straight game. In the loss, Nikita Kucherov netted his 17th of the season for the Lightning. Kings rally to beat the Flyers 5-4. LA was down 4-2. They scored 3 straight. Anze Kopitar had 2 goals in the third period. Numbers 11 and 12, 1 to tie it and 1 to win it. Kings have won 7 straight at home and are 12-2-1 on home ice so far this season. Senators knocked off the Wild in the Twin Cities 3-1. Josh Norris's power play goal in the third period was the game winner, his 14th of the season. And 22-year-old goalie Leevi Marlananen had 31 saves for his first career NHL win. And I may have mispronounced that name.
Can you give it to us again?
Well, it's Leevi. So
Levi.
Levi. I don't know. The 2 E's make me want to say Levy, but it could be Levi. And the last name is Meri.
I'm going with Marilainen.
Lainen. Marilainen. That does sound correct.
Levi Marilainen.
Sabres beat the Blues in St. Louis 4-2. Jason Zucker's power play goal in the third period was a game winner. Tage Thompson gets his 18th of the year. For Buffalo, the Sabres win again. They're unstoppable.
3 straight wins after a 13-game or whatever losing streak. It's got to feel good. And they have, as we mentioned, before the losing streak, they were not off to a bad start to the season. But that losing streak was so severe that it just waylaid any momentum they may have had, any chance at making the playoffs. Now it's about just getting respectable. And 3 wins in a row, that's got to make them feel good as they get ready to wrap up the year.
All right, let's check the standings after a week's worth of action and see where we are. We start in the Central Division. Winnipeg Jets on top, NHL leading 53 points, a record of 28-10-1. Minnesota right now is in second place with 48 points, so 5 points back of the Jets. You've got Colorado in third place with 44 points. Dallas in fourth place with 43 points. Utah, St. Louis both with 38 points. Nashville 29 points, and Chicago with 26 points.
Still a huge gap there between the haves and the have-nots. Dallas not playing great, but certainly is in the wild card spot right now. And a 5-point gap over Utah, which is significant enough that you would think that that's a comfortable lead based on what we've seen through the first 35 games from each of them this season. But Dallas also within striking distance of Minnesota for second, again, a 5-point gap. So with 2 games in hand on Minnesota, no less. So it's going to be an interesting battle for second and third. I don't know that Winnipeg will play at this clip all season. I think Colorado, if anybody's going to catch and pass them, I think it'll be Colorado. But it's going to be a very competitive top of the Central Division, while the bottom 4, I think are already on the outs unless something drastic happens here in the second half.
Yeah, I would agree. How about the Pacific Division? We talked about the Vegas Golden Knights on top with 53 points, 25-8-3 the record. The Kings have reclaimed the second spot with their head-to-head win over Edmonton, and then the Oilers losing to the Ducks as well. So the Kings have 47 points, the Oilers 45. Vancouver, 42 points, Calgary 41 points, so they're hanging around for a wild card spot. Seattle, 34 points, Anaheim 32, and San Jose with 28 points.
One of the things that sticks out to me is Edmonton's reliance on extra time. As you look at that stat, regulation wins, they have 14, and that's the same number that Vancouver has. They have 21 wins overall, but 7 of them have come in overtime. And obviously, when you get 3-on-3 with McDavid and Draisaitl and the talent that they can put out there, the advantage is for Edmonton, but that obviously does not exist in the playoffs. So 5-on-5, they're not as successful. 14 wins in 36 games is not a number that jumps off the page at me. So that's something to keep in mind as the season continues. Of course, points all count the same, but when it gets to the playoffs, remember what this team can do 5-on-5 as opposed to 3-on-3. And the Kings continue to surprise me. Did not see them being this good this season. The Golden Knights, again, surprising me. I thought this would be Edmonton's division from beginning to end, with Vegas and the Kings and Vancouver and potentially Seattle fighting it out for second and third. But Vegas has been amazing, and 53 points through 36 games, man. They are on a absolute roll, and I don't see them slowing down. It doesn't seem like they're on a hot streak or anything. They're just very, very good at scoring goals and keeping goals out of their own net. They have been exceptional this year. They have not allowed 100 goals yet through their 36 games, and they've scored 129.
Let's move over to the Eastern Conference. We'll start in the Atlantic Division. Toronto and Florida both are even with 46 points. They've both played 37 games, and their records are exactly the same at 22, 13, and 2 right now. Boston is your third place team with 44 points. Tampa Bay, 42 points. They've only played 34 games, by the way, have the Lightning. So they've definitely got some games in hand there. Ottawa is hanging around with 40 points. Then you've got Montreal, 35, Detroit, 32, and Buffalo, 32 points on the season.
And as we record this, Ottawa is in a playoff spot with their 40th point tonight, and the win with Levi Meriläinen in net and Mads Sugard as their backup. What a goaltending tandem that is for Ottawa now, what they wanted. But they're in a playoff spot, which is not something I thought we would be saying as we get ready to ring in the new year, but bodes well for them and their rebuild, and they're finally seem to be turning the corner. They've been playing very well, both home and road. They're competitive, at least on the road, 9-9-1 overall. But as you mentioned at the top of the division, I think it's vital for Toronto to win the division, more so than it is for Florida. Florida knows they can go and win the Stanley Cup because they just did it last year. Toronto needs to play, I think, a wild card team in that first round with home ice advantage to really get themselves some momentum in the playoffs and get themselves feeling good. And hopefully somebody knocks out one of the top teams in the other division or in the other series in that first round to kind of ease up their path to the Stanley Cup final, because they have struggled so much against Boston and against Florida in that first round that if they were to play them again, and as much struggles as Boston has had, struggles, quote unquote, they're 2 points out of division lead. It's amazing how Boston has rectified themselves here in this second part of the first half of the season. So very impressive from the Bruins. I did not think they would be here after the coaching change, after the slow start they got off to, but they're right back where they always are, at the top of the division.
Let's check the playoff picture in the Western Conference. We talked about it. Top 3 in the Central: Winnipeg, Minnesota, Colorado.
You didn't give the Metropolitan Division.
I did not?
No.
Well, let me correct that. I apologize. Let's go to the Metropolitan Division, where you had the Devils on top by 1 point on the Capitals. It is New Jersey with 51 points, Washington with 50. However, the Capitals have played 3 fewer games than the Devils, so they have a better point percentage than New Jersey does, but 51 points for the Devils, 50 for the Capitals as we record this. Carolina, 45 points in third place. Then you've got Pittsburgh with 39, Columbus with 36, Philadelphia also 36 points, the Islanders 35 points, and the Rangers in dead last in the Metro with 33 points.
I mean, how does that not get Peter Laviolette fired in New York, that they're in dead last, looking up at the Islanders, looking up at the Flyers, looking up at the Blue Jackets, the Penguins? These are not teams that made the playoffs last year, and they're struggling to keep pace with them, and they're dead last. That's shocking at this point of the season. Not shocking to see New Jersey where they are. It is shocking to see Washington where they are. None of us thought they would be this good this season, especially if you had told us Ovechkin's going to miss 16 of the first 36 games. We would not have thought they would be in this position. fighting for a division title. And Carolina kind of doing a Vegas where they're just kind of going along, not getting a lot of attention. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to be a team that is going to be a contender when it's all said and done, but not getting a lot of attention right now. And the battle for that last wild card spot in the East is going to be very interesting. We'll get a look at the standings in a second here. But as you mentioned, with Pittsburgh, Columbus, Philadelphia, the Islanders, and the Rangers, all within 6 points and all fighting for that last playoff spot with Ottawa, it's going to be a hell of a battle here in the second half of the season, and one to watch when these teams play each other head to head.
All right, now the wild card race in the Western Conference. We told you Winnipeg, Minnesota, Colorado, your top three in the Central. Vegas, LA, and Edmonton, your top three in the Pacific. Now, none of those 6 teams, they're all the same 6 teams that we had a week ago. The only change is LA has moved to second, Edmonton dropped down to third. Dallas has moved into a wild card spot. That last week, it was Calgary and Vancouver holding down the 2 wildcard spots. So Dallas has moved into the number 1 wildcard spot. Vancouver is number 2, and Calgary is your first team on the outside looking in at the moment.
And if you look at point percentage, Dallas is actually ahead of Colorado overall. They've got 43 points in 35 games. That's a 614 point percentage. Colorado has 44 points in 37 games. That's a 595 point percentage. So Dallas is going to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of whether they get one of the top 3 seeds or whether they are a wild card team. That would be a hell of a wild card team for somebody to have to face in the first round, by the way. The battle, I think, becomes between Vancouver, Calgary, potentially Utah, St. Louis, and Seattle for that last wild card spot. And say what you will about the Ducks, Predators, San Jose, and Chicago. I think San Jose and Chicago are firmly in a rebuild and not expecting to compete. Nashville is obviously far underachieving, but playing better in recent games. But Anaheim at 32 points through 35 games puts them on a pace for something in the 70s, which is a far better outcome than I thought at the beginning of the season. And we'll see how they do in the second half when they start trading off some pieces. But I'm at least impressed with the competitiveness the Ducks have shown. 14 wins through 35 games, 32 points. Like I said, if you're on pace for a mid-70s, high 70s point total over the season, I will take that from a team that's been struggling as much as they have.
And over in the Eastern Conference, we talked about it, top 3 in the Atlantic, Toronto, Florida, Boston, top 3 in the Metro, New Jersey, Washington, and Carolina. Same 6 teams from a week ago, and the same 2 wildcard teams still from a week ago, Tampa Bay and Ottawa holding on to that final wildcard spot. They are 1 point up on the Pittsburgh Penguins.
I don't think anybody in the East is out of it yet. I think anybody in the East could still make a run at that last playoff spot. I don't think, it's 8 points there from Ottawa to Buffalo in dead last. And any of those teams I don't believe any of them are locks to absolutely make it or are locks to not make it. I think all of them are capable of putting a run together, and it's going to make it an interesting trade deadline for some of these teams, because if you're a franchise that has not made the playoffs, maybe you're not as big a seller because you're trying to make a push to get that second wildcard spot. And if Ottawa does miss Linus Ullmark for an extended period of time, that's going to really hurt their chances. Pittsburgh is going to be back in the mix. Columbus has played far better than we thought after the offseason that they had and the tragedies that they had. And Philadelphia and Montreal have been more competitive. Philadelphia made the playoffs last year, or barely. Did they make it, or did they barely miss it? I think they barely missed.
They barely missed. Yeah, they missed.
But they were competitive last year, and they're competitive again this year. And then the Islanders and Rangers are teams that are perennially competitive for the playoffs, and the Rangers are so far underachieving that, as bad as they've been, they're still 7 points out of a playoff spot. And if they make it, what a dangerous wild card team they would be to have to play if they get on a heater and win it. So I'm not convinced anybody in the East is out. I think there's 2 teams in the West, probably 3, that are definitely out. I don't think there are 3 teams that are out in the East. Do you think anybody is officially eliminated in the East yet, Eddie? Would you count them out?
Probably not at this point. Probably not at this point. All right, so that was the week that was in the NHL. There was one other note, though, that I did want to pass along from the hockey world. The World Junior Championships are going on in Ottawa. I have actually been paying attention to this because the LA Kings have two hotshot goalie prospects. One is playing for Team Canada, the other for Team USA, and they both look great so far. But the goaltending story is from the nation of Latvia. Did you see Leonards Felbers had 54 saves as Latvia shocked Canada 3-2 in a shootout. He stopped all 8 shooters he saw in the shootout. First ever win for Latvia over Canada in the World Juniors, and they're calling it one of the greatest upsets in World Junior history. I got turned on to this while the game was going on. I was on my phone, and Twitter was like, "Can you believe this game? Can you believe this goalie?" So I flipped over in the third period, watched the end of the third period, watched the overtime, watched the shootout. It was pretty awesome, I got to say. And that was a hell of a moment for Latvia and for this goaltender, Leonards Feldbergs.
Sure. I did not see it, but that was, I think, at the height of my flu. But what a moment for him and what a moment for them to go and beat Canada. And you got to, it's often the case when our Fresno State Bulldogs play a top college football program. I often tell people it's only a big game to us, right? Then when we take the field, we're fired up to be there. When the other team takes the field, they're expecting to kick our ass. And you got to think Canada took the ice expecting to kick Latvia's ass. And they got a battle, and they ended up not coming out with the win. The United States, the very next day, beats Latvia 5-1. Certainly a wake-up call to take it seriously from that. Let's not go out there and get embarrassed. But
I'm sure Latvia was still hungover as well.
Yeah, but I've been watching some of the scores, and I don't know if you gamble on sports.
I'm kidding. They're underage kids. I'm kidding. They would never do that.
Is it underage in Germany or wherever these are being played?
It's in Ottawa.
I think 18's drinking age in Canada.
I don't know. Maybe you're right.
Anyway, regardless, it's a hell of a win for them and a moment that they're never going to forget. And it's a wake-up call for Canada in the early rounds to not take anybody lightly. I bet we see Canada go on and win gold in this thing, and it's all a
no, Doug,
memory.
No. If you see what's going on on the social media there from the Canadian folks, it's the end of the world. It is. The hockey is over. They should just stop playing the sport.
Well, I am happy for Kazakhstan to even be involved in this thing. They're getting their asses kicked on a nightly basis, but it just shows the expansion of hockey around the world to get them involved in a tournament and get them a chance to play in a tournament like this. I did have them plus 11.5 against Czechia. That didn't come through as they got beat 14-2. I don't know what Czechia is doing running up the score like that, but I guess if you're not going to stop playing, we're not going to stop shooting. But I don't pay much attention to this, as you know, and certainly not until the quarterfinals and the games really matter. When it's win or go home, I might tune in, but until then, not much interest.
That'll do
Boston,
it for
Boston. I did want to mention. I'm sorry to cut you off. The Boston Bruins are the only team that have no players in the World Juniors.
Oh, interesting.
That's a damning statement for their prospect development. That zero players are in the World Junior Championships. My goodness.
That'll do it for our first period of our YouTube show. If you enjoyed it and you want to hear more, check out the remaining 2 periods of the Puck Podcast. Just search Puck Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you are listening to the podcast, the second and third periods are coming up in just a moment. If you are watching on YouTube, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand, and we'll talk to you next Monday with another edition of the Puck Podcast.